In this video, we are going to study life processes. What are the life processes? So, why are the molecular movement is needed for life? There must be molecular movement in the life. In viruses, we don't show any molecular movement. So, in them, until they infect the cell, and uh, that is a partly why there is a controversy about whether they are truly alive or not alive. So for something to live alive, there should be a molecular movement in them. So why are the molecular movements needed for life? Why we need a molecular movement? So we have seen in earlier classes that living organism is well organized structure. They have a well organized structures, and they can have tissues. Tissues have cells, and cells have smaller component in them, and so on. Because of the effect of environment, this organized ordered nature of living structure is very likely to keep breaking down over time. If this order breaks down, the organism will no longer alive. So living creature must keep repairing and maintaining their structures. Since all these structures made up of molecules, uh, they must be they must move around all the time. So there must be molecular movement in the living organisms, and these molecular movements happening all around the time is like basic fundamentals of life processes, and this makes some living organism alive. If the if the anyway molecular movements hampers, or the molecular movements does not happens, the life dies, and the organism whole body collapses and it dies. So this is why the life processes is based on the molecular movement inside us. What are life processes? The process which together perform this maintenance job are called life processes. We have What are these maintenance processes? Maintenance processes are needed to prevent the damage and the breakdown. The energy is needed for them. The energy comes from outside the body of the individual organism. So so there must be a process of transfer of source of energy from outside of the body to the organism, and which we call food, to the inside, and a process is commonly known as nutrition. Since life on earth depends upon the carbon based molecule, most of these food sources are also carbon based. The outside sources of energy could be quite varied, since the environment is not under the control of individual organism. So these energy source of energy therefore need to be broken down and built up in the body, and must be finally converted to a uniform source of energy that can be used for the various molecular movements needed for the maintaining the living structure, as well as to the kind of molecules the body need to grow. For this, a series of chemical reactions in the body are necessary. Oxidizing and reducing reactions are some of the most common chemical means to break down of the molecules. For this, many organisms use oxygen sourced from outside the body, and the process of acquiring oxygen from the outside the body and to use it in the process of breaking down the food sources for the cellular need is what we call respiration. We have seen previously how In a multicellular organism, various body parts have a specialized functioning they perform. We are familiar with the idea of these specialized tissues and with their organization in body of the organism. It is therefore not surprising that the uptake of the food and of oxygen will also be a function of the specialized tissue. However, this poses a problem since the food and the oxygen are not taken up at one place in the body of that organism, while all parts of the body need them. This situation creates a need for the transportation system for carrying food and oxygen from one place to another place in the body. So transportation system is required in a body for carrying out the food and oxygen from one place to another place. When the chemical reaction use the carbon source and the oxygen source for the energy generation, we create byproducts, and that are not usually useless in that are not only useless for the cell in our body but also could harm our body. So these waste product are therefore needed to be removed from the body and discarded outside by the process called excretion. So there must be a system of excretion in the body. So again, if the basic rules of the for the body design in a multicellular organism are followed, specialized tissue for the excretion will be developed, which means that the transportation system will need to transport waste away from the cells to the excretory system. Nutrition. There are two types of nutrition, and autotrophs and heterotrophs. And the autotroph include green plants and some bacteria. They are autotrophic. What is autotrophic nutrition? Carbon and energy requirement of the autotrophs organisms are fulfilled by the photosynthesis. These are the those animals, those organisms which makes their requirement of the carbon and energy requirement from the photosynthesis. So they are not depending on other organisms, they are depending on the sun and the organic molecules surrounded by them, not any living organism. The carbohydrate which are not used immediately or stored in the form of starch. What happens in the plants? There is a photosynthesis process in the plants, and in during the photosynthesis carbohydrate creates, and carbohydrate is not used immediately, which is not used immediately are stored in the form of starch, and which is a internal energy reserved for a plant. At a somewhat similar situation seen in us when in us means in humans, where some of the energy driven from the food we eat is stored in our body in the forms of glycogen. Like in trees, the food is stored in the form of starch. In humans, it is stored in the form of glycogen. So this is how the photosynthesis happens in the plants, and this is what the autotrophic nutrition, how the autotrophic nutrition makes the plant only depends on the sunlight and the water and carbon dioxide. When the carbon dioxide and dihydromonoxides uh, do some reactions in the chlorophyll in the presence of sunlight, one molecule which is C6H12O6 forms, which is known as glucose, and this is the energy form in a of a living being in both plants and animals. So the following events occur during this process. How this chemical reaction happens? Absorption of a light energy by chlorophyll. First, chlorophyll absorbs the light energy, then conversion happens conversion of light energy to the chemical energy by splitting the water molecule into hydrogen and oxygen separately. Then the carbon dioxide reduction of the carbon dioxide to carbohydrate. These steps need not to be taken one after one immediately. So it is not necessary these steps should be one by one. For example, in a desert plant take up carbon dioxide at night and prepare intermediate which is acted upon by the energy absorbed by the chlorophyll during the day. So in desert plant I evolve in a different way, and in this process some processes happens in day and some processes happens in night. So there is a cross section of a leaf of a plant. This There is a epidermis, upper epidermis and lower epidermis. Inside these we have a chloroplast and gas cells, and it is the site of photosynthesis. These are the guard cells, and which controls the respiration of plant, like carbon exchange of oxygen and carbon dioxide. uh, it is important to note that here that the exchange of gases occur across the surface of the stem, roots, leaves as well. So not only uh, on the leaves of a plant, the exchange of the gases also occurs in the stem and roots of the plant. Since large amount of water can also be lost through these stomata, the plant closes these pores when it does not need carbon dioxide for the photosynthesis. And it opens and closes. The opening and closing of the pores is a function of a guard cell, and the guard cell swells when the water flow into them and causing the stomata pore to open. When the water flows inside these guard cell and these get opens and there is a stomata pore inside it, it is where the exchange of gases happens, carbon dioxide and oxygen. When the water removes from the guard cell, it sinks, and this is how we close the stomatal pore. And the nutrition is a essential element used in the synthesis of the protein and other compound. And second type of nutrition is a heterotropic nutrition. In autotropic nutrition is getting by the photosynthesis, and these are the heterotropic nutrition. They are depend on the other living organisms or dead organisms. Other depends on other organism. Some organisms break down food material outside the body and then absorb it. Example like fungi. Examples are fungi like bread mold, yeast, and mushroom. And some other organisms derive nutrition from plants, animals without killing them. And this parasitic nutritive strategy is used by a wide variety of organisms like cuscutta and tricks, lice, leech, and tapeworms. So these are also subdivided into multiple categories. Some are parasite which use energy, which use food without killing the other animals. And there are some organisms which use the food material by decayed or killed organisms. Like fungi are the most common examples among these. So there are the different ways how the organism obtain their nutrition from the outside. And let's just discuss about these different ways of uh, obtaining nutrition. It is different in animals from plants, and also it is different in unicellular cellular organisms. Amoeba is a unicellular organism. It takes food using a temporary finger like extension of the cell surface, which fuse over the food particle, forming the vacuole. So like food is near of the amoeba, it is extends its finger like thing, and this is called pseudophilia. And then these fingertips diffuses on the food particles, and the food get absorbed. The remaining undigested material is removed to the surface of the cell and thrown out. In paramecium, what happens in paramecium, which is also a unicellular organisms, the cell has a definite shape and the food is taken at a specific spot. So in a paramecium, there is a specific spot for the intake of a food, but in amoeba, which is a unicellular, there is no specific. It takes food by like extending its outermost layer, like finger like extension, and these diffuses on the food and taken inside the amoeba. And let's talk about the nutrition in the human beings. Alimentary canal in humans is basically the long tube existing extending from mouth to anus, and this is the alimentary canal here. It extends from the mouth. It goes, the food goes from here in the stomach, then digests, and then it's in the small intestine, then from the large intestine, and ends here. From mouth to anus, this is the this called alimentary canal, and it is also called digestive system. We eat various types of food which has to pass through a same digestive tract. Naturally, the food has to be processed to generate particles which are small and of the same texture. This is achieved by crushing the food into our teeth. Since the lining of the canal is soft, the food is also wetted to make the passage smooth. The saliva is making the food smooth, and the teeth are grinding the food to make small uh, particles. When we eat something, we like our mouth waters, and this is actually not because not actually not only water but also a fluid called saliva secreted by the salivary gland. Another aspect of the food we ingest is its complex nature, and if it is to be absorbed from the alimentary canal, it has to be broken into simpler molecules. This is done by the biological catalyst called enzymes. The saliva contains the enzymes called salivary amylase that breaks down the starch, which is a complex molecule, into simple sugar. So the enzyme present in the saliva uh, breaks down the complex food uh, into, which is a complex food means a starch, which is made up of a large glucose molecule into a simple glucose molecule, and this enzyme is called salivary amylase. And the food goes down our intestines and through the food pipe, which is called esophagus, through a rhythmic order, and that rhythmic order is called peristaltic movement. So this peristaltic movement pushes the food down forwards. The food pipe is also called esophagus. This is the esophagus. And what happens in the stomach when the food goes in the stomach? The digestion in the stomach is taken care of by the gastric glands present in the wall of the stomach. And how this happens? The gastric glands releases hydrochloric acid HCl, a protein digesting enzyme called pepsin, and a mucus. Three things is it secretes. One is HCl, one is pepsin, and one is third thing is mucus. What hydrochloric acid do? HCl creates the acidic medium which facilitates the action of the enzyme pepsin. So the HCl is making the food acidic. So the function of the pepsin may be performed. Uh, so this is what the and what pepsin do. Pepsin breaks down the protein. And what mucus do? Mucus protect the inner lining of the stomach from the action of the acid under the normal condition. So this is for the protecting the stomach layer, and this is for the making the food acidic nature. And this is for the digesting of protein. This pepsin is for digesting of protein. So after the stomach, the exit of the food from the stomach is regulated by the sphincter muscle. Here we have a sphincter muscle, and this controls how much amount of the food from the stomach enters into the doldrum, which is the initial part of the small intestine. And what happens in a small intestine? Small intestine is extensive coiled. It is like extensively coiled, circular this way, and herbivorous. About the length of the small intestine, herbivorous eating a grass need a longer intestine to allow the cellulose to get digest. We just discussed that above. The plant uh, makes a glucose, and if it is not used immediately, it then stored up as a cellulose. Okay, let's discuss about the nutrition in human beings. How in human beings we take a nutrition. And the alimentary canal is basically a long tube extending from the mouth to anal, and this is the alimentary canal. This is called also known as a digestive system. So this alimentary canal performs the action of digestion of food in human body. And we eat a various type of food which has a we eat a various type of food which has to pass through the same digestive tract. Naturally, the food has to be processed to generate particles that are smaller and of same texture. Okay, this is achieved by the crushing the food with our teeth. Since lining of the canal is soft, the food is also wetted to make its passage smooth. When we eat something, we like our mouth waters. This is actually this is actually not only the water but also the fluid called saliva. And saliva is secreted by the salivary glands. And another aspect of the food we ingest is its complex nature, and it is to be absorbed from the alimentary canal. It has to be broken down into simpler and smaller molecules, and this is done by the biological catalysts called enzymes. So what enzymes do? Enzymes break down the food into simpler molecules, and the saliva contain an enzyme called salivary amylase that breaks down the starch, which is a complex molecule, to give a simple sugar. So saliva, what is saliva enzyme is doing? It is helping the breaking down of a complex starch into simple sugar. And how the food travels through our digestive system in a esophagus, then in a small and large intestine. It is it is because of peristaltic movement. It is a rhythmic order which pushes the food forward, and this rhythmic order is called peristaltic movement. And the food pipe is also known as esophagus. Let's just digest up. Let's now the food enters here inside our stomach, and what happens in the stomach? First, the gastric gland are present on the walls of the stomach. They releases three things. One is hydrochloric acid, second thing is pepsin, third thing is mucus. Hydrochloric acid creates a acidic medium, and which is to facilitate the action of the enzyme pepsin. Now pepsin will digest protein. Pepsin is an enzyme, and it digests protein. And mucus is a protective mucus form the protective layer. It protects the wall of the stomach, so the hydrochloric acid may not cause harm to the walls of the stomach. So that is why the mucus is produced, and it sticks to the walls of the stomach, and it protects the wall. And then after the stomach, the exit of the food from the stomach is regulated by the sphincter muscle. And now the food enters into the small intestine, which is extensively coiled this way. And the herbivorous eating grass, those animals which eat grass, needs a longer small intestine to allow the cellulose to be digested. So cellulose needs to be digested. So that is why long intestine is needed. While those are not herbivorous, those are a meat eater, and it easy to digest, and it is meat is easy to digest, and hence the carnivorous like tiger have a shortened and a shortened small intestine. And small intestine is also site of the complete digestion of carbohydrate, protein, and fat. It receives the secretions of liver and pancreas for this purpose. So it receives the enzymes from the pancreas and liver to make the food completely digested. And the food coming from the stomach is acidic. As we discussed, the HCl makes the food acidic in the stomach. Hence, to make it alkaline, one thing happens: a bile juice gets secreted. The bile juice makes the food acidic into a alkaline, which is a basic. And what pancreas secretes? Pancreas secretes pancreatic juice, which contains enzyme like trypsin for digesting protein, lipase for breaking down of emulsified fat. And the walls of the small intestine contain glands which secretes intestinal juice, and this enzyme present in it finally converts the protein into amino acid and complex carbohydrate into glucose and fats into fatty acids. So what is happening when food is exiting from the stomach is go into small intestine. So first, in a small intestine at a doldrum, the bile juice secreted. The bile juice makes the acidic food coming, the food which is acidic coming from the stomach, make it acidic food alkaline. And then the pancreas is secreting pancreatic juice. Two types of molecule it is secreting. One is trypsin, which is helping digesting of the protein, and also the lipase, which is breaking down the fat molecule. And also the walls of the small intestine also produce intestinal juice, and these intestinal juice converts the protein into amino acid, which is absorbed by our body, and complex carbohydrate into simple glucose molecule, and fat into fatty acid and cholesterol. The digested food is taken up by the walls of the intestine. What is digested food? Amino acid, carbohydrate, and fatty acid and cholesterol are the digested food. How it is taken up by the walls of the intestine? The numerous finger-like projection called villi are there in the walls of the intestine, and villi are the richly supplied with the blood vessels, and which takes the absorption of the food to each and every cells in the body. So villi are the things which absorbs the food. Why? Because it has a lot of blood vessels, and this food is absorbed by the process of diffusion. The unabsorbed food is sent into the larger intestine where the walls of it absorbs water. So only one thing is happening in a larger intestine. This is absorption of water, and the food is finally removed from our body, from the anus, and in the last and regulated by the anal sphincter. About the dental caries. A dental caries or a tooth decay causes a gradual softening of the enamel or dentine. It begins when the bacteria acting on the sugar produces acid that softens or demineralizes the enamel, and masses of bacterial cells together with the food particles stick to the teeth to form the dental plaque, and saliva cannot reach to the tooth surface to neutralize the acid as the plaque covers the teeth. Brushing the teeth after eating removes the plaque before the bacteria produce the acid, and if untreated, microorganisms may invade the pulp, causing the inflammation and the infection. Let's talk about the respiration. In all cases, the first step is to break down of the glucose. What is the respiration? Respiration is like the process of taking energy and creating energy by a cell. How does the cell creates energy? It needs during for this process uh, oxygen, and the byproduct is carbon dioxide. So what is the first step for breaking down of glucose? Like glucose is the thing C6S12 C6S12O6, which breaks down to make energy, and this process inside the cell and exchange all this is called respiration. So respiration happens inside the cell, and how this happens? The first step is the breaking down of the glucose, which is six carbon molecules into a three carbon molecules called pyruvate. So it breaks down the glucose, which is a six carbon molecule, to form a pyruvate, and pyruvate, two molecules of pyruvate is formed by the one molecule of glucose. This process takes place in the cytoplasm of the cell, and further the pyruvate may be converted into ethanol and carbon dioxide, and this process takes place in yeast during the fermentation. And in absence of oxygen, it is called anaerobic respiration, and where there is no oxygen, this the process of making energy is called anaerobic respiration, and where the breaking down of a pyruvate using the oxygen takes place in the mitochondria, and when there is oxygen, this is called aerobic respiration, and this process of breaking down, and this process happens in the mitochondria, and the air present, which is oxygen, is uh, if this reaction happens in the mitochondria in the presence of air, this is called aerobic reaction and aerobic respiration. The release of energy in aerobic process is a lot greater than the anaerobic process. So this is why the uh, so aerobic process is a more efficient because it produces more energy. And what happens in lack of oxygen? When there is no oxygen or lack of oxygen, the pyruvate converted into lactic acid, and lactic acid causes cramps, muscle cramps especially. So the 6 carbon molecule glucose converts into the 2 carbon molecules of pyruvate. And what happens in the absence of oxygen? The pyruvate converts into ethanol and carbon dioxide and energy in the yeast. And lack of oxygen in a muscle cell. When the pyruvate converts into a muscle cell, what happens in this case? There is a lack of oxygen, and in this case the lactic acid is formed, which causes the cramp, and energy is released, which is a comparatively small. And in presence of oxygen, which is happening in a mitochondria, the carbon dioxide is forming, and water and energy is there. In this case, energy is comparatively high. So there are various pathways how the glucose is finally making energy. The energy released during the cellular respiration is immediately used up to synthesize a molecule of ATP. The energy release is used to synthesize the molecule of ATP, which is used to fuel other activities of the cell. What is ATP? ATP is an energy currency for most cellular process. The energy released during the process of respiration is used to make up the ATP molecule from the ATP and inorganic phosphate. When the ATP reacts with the one phosphate molecule, it creates the ATP. It is a diphosphate, and this is a triphosphate. This is an endothermic process, and endothermic process in which the cell then endothermic process in the cell then use this ATP to derive the reaction. When the terminal phosphate linkage in ATP is broken using water, an energy equivalent to itna 30.5 kilojoule per mole is released. Similarly, ATP can be used in the cell for the contraction of the muscles, protein synthesis, and conduction of the nerve impulses, and many other activities. And this is what happens in the animals. And the plant exchanges gases through the stomata, and carbon dioxide, oxygen are exchanged here by the process of diffusion. So in both animals and plants, the carbon dioxide and oxygen's exchange of these two gases happens by the process of diffusion, while the higher concentrated site molecules travels to the site where there is a low concentration. Direction of diffusion depends upon the environmental condition and the requirement of the plant. At night, when there is no photosynthesis occurring, the CO2 elimination is a major exchange activity going on. Plant in respiration also produces CO2, and While in photosynthesis, the plant produces oxygen. So during a day, there is a lot of photosynthesis going on. So lot of oxygen is needed, and the CO2 produced by the plant in for after respiration in respiration is used up in the photosynthesis process. So during the day, the net there is a net removal of oxygen molecule by the plant. At night, when there is no photosynthesis occurring, only the carbon dioxide comes out of the plants. During the day, CO2 generated during the respiration is used up for the photosynthesis. Hence, there is no CO2 release. Instead, oxygen is released as a major event at this time. Since the amount of absorbed oxygen is fairly low compared to the amount of oxygen in the air, the rate of breathing in aquatic organisms is much faster than that is seen in terrestrial organisms. This is the dissolved oxygen, means it dissolve oxygen in water. So there is a very low amount of dissolved oxygen in the water. So water animals breathe rapidly and in a much faster rate in comparison to the terrestrial organisms. Fishes intake takes water through their mouth and force it to pass through the gills, where the dissolved oxygen is taken up by the blood. In human beings, the air passing through the nostril is filtered by the fine hair that lines the passage. The passage is also lined with mucus, and it helps in capturing the unnecessary particles like big particles, so that the air we breathe is pure. And rings of the cartilage are present in the throat, and that makes and that ensure the air passes do not collapses. This is the human respiratory systems. And within the lung, the passage divides into smaller and smaller tubes, which finally terminates balloon-like structure, which is called alveoli. This is a unit of the breathing thing. This is where the exchange happens, on the wall of the alveoli. The walls of the alveoli contains extensive network of the blood vessels, and this is where the exchange of gases happens by the process of diffusion. When we breathe in, we lift our rib and flatten our diaphragm. This is called diaphragm, and the chest cavity becomes larger. As a result of this, the air is sucked into the lungs. And when the body size of an animal is a large, the diffusion pressure alone cannot take care of oxygen delivery to the all the parts. So in a smaller animals, the diffusion can make the oxygen to reach the whole body, but in a larger amount, the diffusion by the lungs cannot uh, bring the oxygen to the whole of the part. So this creates a necessity for a transportation system. In human beings, a respiratory pigment is hemoglobin, which has a very high affinity with the oxygen. It attaches with the oxygen very much. This pigment is present in the blood corpuscles, 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 and carbon dioxide is more soluble in water than oxygen, and hence most transported, and the carbon dioxide is mostly transported in dissolved form in our blood. Do you know The upper part of the respiratory tract is provided with a small hair-like silica. Hair-like structure called silica. This silica helps to remove the germ, dust, and other harmful particles from inhaled air. Smoking destroys these silica. This is why smoking is not good for our health. It causes infection, cough, and even the lung cancer. If the alveolar surface were spread out, it would cover the 80 meter. This is how, like, how the surface area is too much large, and it facilitates the huge amount of exchange of carbon dioxide and oxygen. If diffusion were if diffusion were to remove the oxygen in our body, and if diffusion, we don't have a transportation system of carrying out the carbon dioxide and oxygen throughout the body. In this case, what would happen? The diffusion will be the only system, and it is estimated that it would take 3 years for a molecule of oxygen to get into our toes from lungs. So this is why blood forms blood, which is a transporting system, helps us. Transportation system in a human beings. Let's discuss about the transportation system. The blood, being a fluid connective tissue, and consists of this is a blood is a transportation system. How it works? The blood consists of a fluid medium called plasma, and plasma transport the food, carbon dioxide, and nitrogenous waste in dissolved form. Oxygen is carried. Oxygen is carried by the red blood capsules, and which has the hemoglobin. This is the structure of the heart. The blood from our body, which is deoxygenated, first enters from here. It goes here, and when the heart pumps, this valves closes, and the blood goes there. In the lungs, uh, it goes through the walls of alveoli, where through the process of diffusion there happens exchange of carbon dioxide and oxygen. And in the deoxygenated blood, we have around 4% of the carbon, and in atmosphere we have a 0.03% of the carbon dioxide, and in oxygen, atmosphere has a 20% of the oxygen, and deoxygenated blood has a 16% of the oxygen. So through the process of diffusion, these becomes the same. These percentages become the same, and again the carbon dioxide goes there by the diffusion, and oxygen comes in the blood by the process of diffusion. So again, the oxygenated blood comes through these pulmonary veins, and when heart pumps, this valve closes, and the oxygen blood goes this way to the different part of our body different parts. This is how the heart pumps. Valves ensure the blood do not flow backward when the arteria and ventricles contracts. Oxygen in blood. Oxygen enters the blood in the lungs. The separation of the right side and the left side of the heart is useful so that there cannot be mixing of oxygenated and deoxygenated blood. This is useful in animals that have a high energy need, like birds and mammals. An animal that do not use energy for this purpose, the body temperature depends on the temperature of the environment. And such animals like amphibians or the many reptiles have a three-chambered heart, and they can tolerate some mixing of oxygenated and deoxygenated blood. Uh, Fish, on the other hand, have only two-chambered heart, uh, and uh, and the blood is pumped to the gills, is oxygenated here and passes directly to the rest of the body. So thus the blood goes heart through once only. Blood goes only once through the heart, and on the other hand, it goes through the heart twice in humans and other mammals, in birds and also mammals. It goes through the heart twice during the each cycle into the cycle in other vertebrates. This is known as double circulation. When there is a single circulation, what happens? The heart is pumped, it goes through. In case of fishes, this is a heart, and this is the lungs, and this is the body. There are multiple blood vessels here. It finally connects here. So when in fishes which have a single circulation system, when the body pumps the heart pumps the blood goes here and it gets oxygenated through these are the gills, which is lungs of the fishes. These are the gills. They become oxygenated, and they are pushed there in the different part of the body, and body consumes the oxygen during the process of the respiration, and byproduct is carbon dioxide, and it goes here, and carbon dioxide blood again goes in the heart, and this heart again pumps it. This is how the single circulatory system works in case of humans. And let's talk about the triple, in case of reptiles, when there is a uh, so heart has only two chamber here. From one it is coming, from one it is going. In case of reptiles, there are three chambered heart, so there is some mixing. What happens is that this lining is not there in the reptiles, and the oxygenated blood and deoxygenated blood mixes. And in case of mammals and animals, we have a four chambered heart. We have a four chamber. One is there, two, 1 2 3 4. So first the deoxygenated blood is coming, and when heart is pumping, this valve is closing and deoxygenated blood is going this way. And in lungs it is getting oxygenated, and it again goes to the heart this way, and heart again pumps, it compresses the of the blood, the valves closes, and the heart oxygen, which is oxygenated blood, goes this way. So for the circulation, the blood is traveling through the heart twice, and this double twice entering of the blood is called double circulation. About the blood pressure, the force that exerts against the wall of the vessel is called a blood pressure, and this pressure is a much greater in the artery than the veins. Why? Because in arteries, blood is going in a high pressure pumped blood is going in the artery. So so no, so not to so this must be a thick, so the high pressure can be tolerated by the thick walls, where veins which like carries the blood from the body parts to the hearts do not has a very does not have a very high pressure. Instead, they have valves so that the backward flow can be avoided. So they do not need uh, thick walls. Also, one more interesting thing, in the heart, this wall, when pushes, takes the oxygen into lungs. So it, and this wall, when pushes, the takes the takes sorry when this wall pushes, takes the blood into lungs. When this wall pushes, that takes the blood to the different part of the body, which needs large amount of pressure. So comparatively, this wall of the heart is more thicker compared to this wall. And the pressure of a blood inside the artery during the ventricular uh, systole is called contraction, and it is also called systolic pressure. When the heart contracts, there is a systolic pressure on the walls of the arteries, and ventricle diastole is a relaxation. When the heart relaxes and there will be no pressure, this is called diastolic pressure. And this pressure is a when heart pumps, when there applies a force on the walls, that force is 120 mm of Hg. And when there is no pressure, in that case the normal pressure is 80 mg, 80 mm of Hg. Hg is a mercury here. This is how we measure heartbeat, by analyzing the gap between the pressure cut and pressure when systolic pressure and diastolic pressure, systolic and diastolic pressure. And there is an instrument which is called stagnometer. And high pressure, when there is a high pressure, this is called hypertension, and this causes the contraction of arteries, and which result in the increased resistance to blood flow. Actually, this is opposite. Constriction of the arteries, when arteries are wide enough, and in this case it contracted, arteries are become like contracted, and this contraction causes, definitely will cause a high blood pressure. When the large volume is there, the blood can easily pass. When there is a small volume, blood needs to be passed by higher pressure. So this contraction of the arteries causes high blood pressure, that leads to the rupture of the artery and internal bleeding. When there is a high pressure, the wall cannot resist the high blood pressure, so it can rupture and cause internal bleeding. The tube blood vessel. Arteries are a blood vessel which carries the blood away from the heart to the various other organs. Arteries carries from heart to other organs, whereas, and so they have a thick and elastic walls because they have a high pressure of blood. Veins collect the blood from the different organs and bring back to the heart. They do not need a thick wall because the blood is no longer under pressure. Instead, they have a valves that ensure the blood flows only in one direction. So in veins there is a vein. This is heart, and this is the other body organ. So there is a waves this like. So blood can only flow this way. and when it coming back it closes this way, so there cannot be backward flow. On reaching on reaching an organ or a tissue, the artery is divided into smaller and smaller vessels to bring the blood in contact with all the individual cells. The smallest vessels have walls which is one cell thick, and these are called capillaries. So when the arteries are reaching the organs, it branches into multiple vessels, and these vessels near the cell are only uh, one cell thick, and these vessels are capillaries. And this is how do for the process of diffusion, by diffusion process, the exchange of material between the blood and the surrounding takes place in this, and the capillary joins together from to form a veins, and these capillaries again joins to form a veins that carries the blood again into the heart. Maintenance by the platelet. How the platelet maintains? When the blood has a platelet cells which circulate around the body and plug these leaks by helping to clot the blood as at the point of injury. When the blood vessel ruptures or blood vessel breaks down, these platelets gather there and makes a clot. Avoids leaking of the blood. What is a lymph is doing? There is another type of fluid involved in transportation other than the blood, and this is called a lymph or a tissue fluid. Though the pores, uh, though the pores present in the walls of capillaries, some amount of plasma, protein, and blood cells escapes into the intercellular space in the spaces in the tissues to form the tissue fluid or a lymph. These are the escaped material from the blood, which is plasma, protein, and blood cells, and these intercellular spaces in the tissue, and this forms the tissue fluid, which is a lymph. uh, it is similar to the plasma of a blood, but colorless and contains the less protein. The lymph drains into the lymphatic capillaries from the intercellular spaces, which joins to form a large lymph vessels that finally opens into larger vein. Lymph carries digestate and absorbed fat from the intestine and drains excess fluid from extracellular space into the blood. Now discuss about the transportation in plants. We will study two things here, xylem and phloem. How these two guys transport food and minerals in the plants. Xylem moves water and minerals obtained from the soil, and on the other hand, phloem transports the product of the photosynthesis, which is the glucose from the leaves where they are synthesized to the other part of the plant. Transportation water is done by the xylem, and in fact evaporation of the water molecules from the cells to the leaves create a suction, and which fills the water from the xylem cells of roots, and so roots, through the xylem roots the water goes up to the top of the plants in every part. This is because of the the second thing, capillary actions, and happens here. And loss of water in the form of vapor from the aerial part of the plant is called transpiration. The vapor evaporizes here, and this evaporation is called transpiration. Thus the transpiration helps the absorption and upward movement of the water and minerals it absorbed in it from the roots to leaves. So transpiration is a process which by the function of which the water is and the mineral is pulled up from the soil to the top of the tree. Transportation of food and other substances. This transportation of soluble product of photosynthesis is called translocation, and in a part it occurs in the part of vascular tissue called phylum. So this translocation of the food from the leaves where it forms by the photosynthesis is done by the phylum tissue. And unlike the transportation in xylem, which can be largely explained by the simple physical forces, the trans which is the capillary action through the transpiration, the translocation the from the leaves to all parts of the body of the tree, the translocation in the phylum is achieved by utilizing energy. It needs energy, and material like sucrose is manufactured in the phylum tissue using the transferred to phylum tissue using energy from ATP. How the excretion system happens in our body. Other metabolic activities generates nitrogenous waste which should be removed, which needs to be removed. So excretion in a human body, excretion in human beings. Excretory system of the human beings includes the pair of kidney, a pair of uterus, pair of kidneys, and pair of uterus, and urinary bladder, and urethra. And the capillary cluster of in a kidney is associated with the cup-shaped end of a coiled tube called Bowman's capsule that collects the filtrate. Each kidney has a large number of filtrate units. These are called nephrons. So nephron is a filtration unit in kidneys and packaged close together. Some substance in the intestinal filtrate such as glucose, amino acids, salts, and a major amount of water are selectively reabsorbed and as the urine flows along the tube. The bladder muscle is also called the bladder muscle. The bladder is a muscle. It is under the nerve control. So these are the bladder. So these muscles are under the nerve control. What happens when our kidney do not functions? We have to artificially filter the blood. Filtering the blood means removing the nitrogenous waste from the blood. So how it is to be done? And if kidneys are not working, it leads to the accumulation of the poisonous nitrogenous waste in our body. An artificial kidney is a device to remove the nitrogenous waste product from the blood through the dialysis. This fluid has the same osmotic pressure as a blood. So this is the device. Here the oxygen, the blood goes and all the nitrogenous waste removed, and then it is re-entered into the blood. Normally in a healthy adult, the initial filter rate in the kidney is about 180 liter per day daily, and however the volume actually excreted is only 1 or 2 liter a day. This is because the remaining filter rate is reabsorbed by the kidney tubulates. So because the kidney also like filtering lot of proteins, carbohydrate, fat, essential things, and these are reabsorbed by the blood again. So total it filtrates 180 liter a day. And talking about the net filtration, like water and all that nitrogenous waste, it is only 1 to 2 liter a day. Organ donation. The most organ and tissue donation occurs just after donor has died, or when the doctor declares it is a brain dead. But some organs such as kidney, part of the liver or lungs, etc., and the tissue can be donated while the donor is alive. So other organs can be donated after person die or it is a brain dead. But during a lifetime, during a person living, the kidneys and liver, lungs can be donated. And next, what happens? How the plant excretes oxygen itself can be thought of a waste product generated during the photosynthesis. So in photosynthesis, oxygen is a waste for the plant, which is removed by diffusion, by the diffusion process, by the stomata itself. Many plants waste products are stored in the cellular vacuoles, and waste product may be stored in the leaves and that fall off. Other waste products is stored as a resin and gum, especially in old xylem. Plant also excrete some waste substance into the soil around them. So this is how the excretory system works in the plants. Let's quickly revise this chapter. The movement of various types can be taken. The movement of various types can be taken as an indication of the life, and there is no movements in the virus, so we do not consider it living. Maintenance of life requires processes like nutrition, respiration, transportation of minerals within the body, and excretion of the waste product. Autotrophic nutrition involves the intake of a simpler inorganic materials from the environment and using an external energy source like a sun to synthesize the complex high energy organic material, which is happening in the plants and some bacteria, phyto phytoplankton. And high energy organic material is a glucose. On the other hand, heterotrophic nutrition involves intake of the complex material prepared by other organisms, prepared by other. This may include heterotrophic animals and autotrophic animals. In human beings, food is eaten and broken down into various steps. Along with the alimentary canal and digested food is absorbed in the small intestine and sent to all the cells of the body. And during the process of respiration, organic compounds such as glucose are broken down to provide energy, and this energy is immediately utilized to synthesize the ATP molecule. ATP is used to provide energy for other reaction in the cell. Respiration may be aerobic and anaerobic. Aerobic respiration makes more energy, and this aerobic respiration happens in the mitochondria, while anaerobic reactions happens in the cytoplasm of a cell, and it creates low energy. In human beings, transportation of a material such as oxygen, carbon dioxide, food, and excretory products is a function of circulatory system. And circulatory system consists of a heart, blood, and blood vessels. A highly differentiated parts, highly differentiated plants. Highly differentiated plants mean plants would have leaves, stem, and roots. And the transport of the water and mineral and food and other minerals is the function of the vascular tissue, which consists of a xylem and phloem. In human being, excretory products in the form of a soluble nitrogen compound is removed by the nephron. Nephron is a unit of kidney through the kidneys, and the plant use variety of techniques to get rid of waste. For example, the waste material may be stored in the cellular vacuoles, or as a gum or as a resin, and removed in the it can be also stored in the leaves which falls, and it also excretes the waste material in its surrounding soils. Here the chapter ends.